Una?
I don't have a huge amount to add on this. I mean, as housing associations, many of us are too small, if you like, to get into those framework agreements. But what we've done is we've worked together. So in Bristol, in fact, in the west of England, the largest associations have teamed up with the smaller housing associations, and we're all working in the same framework. So as far as we're concerned, we'll carry on with that. We've only been going for a year or so. That gives us huge benefits in terms of our collaboration with each other, because it means we're not having to all go through the European processes, and we're able to sort of have economies of scale from us working together. So I can't see any reason why we wouldn't carry on working with that. So the answer is probably yes, we will. I think that what I've been a bit worried about is where the small local contractors, and many of us are based in our communities, we want to support that local labour, bring on the small contractors, keep them going, and often they're just not in a position to be able to compete for those frameworks. And it's not just actually the contractors, it's also consultants who haven't wanted to go through that process or haven't got the resources, the economies of scale to go through those processes. So we're looking at how we can make sure that we don't lose that vital sort of local economy, sort of small contractors and small consultants within that as well. And so it may be that we have smaller schemes, smaller sites where we don't put into the framework, and we're looking at how we can do that in the future.
Okay, I'd like to throw it out to the audience now. Jeff, third row back.
Jeff Summers of BAM Construction, another national contractor with a strong regional presence. I think that in this instance, clients want their cake and eat it. Firstly, taking on from Lynn's point, we're probably in common with our competitors very keen on keeping our supply chain in business, because we don't want to change the supply chain any more than anybody else does, and certainly not to the lowest price. So we try and pay them on time to keep the cash flow going. If necessary, we'll buy materials on their behalf to help them through. But we've had situations where we're in frameworks with public sector, agreed prelims, markup, overheads, and they've come back and said, look, the market's different, would you look at it again? Well, they didn't say that when market was booming and all the prices were going through the roof. Well, look, we think we ought to increase it because you're obviously suffering a bit. And I've also heard from a consultant recently of a major framework client of theirs, come along, 40% cut in fees, across the board, we take our work elsewhere. Now, I'm sorry, if you're going to get that situation, then you're going to disrupt people's supply chain, you're going to get unknown quantities, and we're all going to have problems. So I do think sometimes it's a bit of a one-way street.
So, panel, clients want their cake and eat it.
Yeah, we do, I suppose. Just to talk about your particular company, I still call it HBG, but it's not anymore, is it? Yeah. You've had a rebranding, you've kept the same colours, but it was interesting that your Scottish area, the local area, we pay more profit to them than we do anybody else. And that's because they deliver a fantastic service and have done for the past 20 odd years in that particular area. And they've worked very, very closely with their supply chain, and actually it's one which we've learned from, that you only get what you pay for in terms of the quality of the individuals and also the output. In terms of some of the framework contractors, there are certainly a stronger level of KPI in terms of their achievement, what they've achieved. And it isn't based on cost. It is based on a higher performance level. Now, that may be the same thing in terms of eking out the same thing, but we're open and explicit, and we tell them way before they ever get involved in an ASDA contract what that's all about. So they have a choice at the end of the day, as much as the incumbents have a choice as well. In some of the things that we talk about in terms of our profit and framework contracting, you mentioned it may be a competitor of ours or whatever, but I'm not bothered about that. We've decided that whatever our competition does, we've got to find our own agenda, because it'd be wrong to follow our competition. We are down a similar road, whether it is payment terms or cash challenge. Because actually, we find that in this particular environment, we get better value out of those particular consultants and contractors in the way we approach this. And actually, if you break that level of trust and bond, actually you're probably in a worse situation, because if there's any turn up in the economy, like will surely come, then they're likely to go anyway. So that level of honesty is and integrity is very, very important.
Would you like to come back as a questioner, Peter?
I think that's I think what you're saying is admirable, and I think it's as leaders in the industry, client representatives such as yourselves, that's an excellent example to set. And I think David's comment about the 10-year sustainable aspect is very, very important, because it gives a long-term dimension. I do think, I have to agree with Jeff, that there are many others who perhaps at the middle management level, which is often a problem, are trying to sort of run their own agenda, and having been, many of the middle managers of the industry having been brought up in a lowest price environment, are reverting back to that. And it is, there is definitely, I'm seeing a definite reversion. But it is very good to see that you are promoting that teamwork and longevity and working together, because, as you say, eventually somebody's every dog has its day.
There are some challenges.
Oh, of course.
And one of the things we've talked about early on is quality. And we have no tolerance now of a poor quality product. And before, you could sort of put a coach and horses through our specification. And now we've become a lot more firmer in that, and that's one of the entry points, isn't it? If you're not going to make sure that we're not going to be a sort of a commercially take the commercial advantage in terms of this, then we want something out of it, and it's either speed or quality or some form of reduction of labour or more proprietary work, etc. But we want something out of that service you're providing.
David, do you want to come back?
Well, just very briefly, I was quite interested that Bob challenged Jeff on HGV colours. I'm sure Bob was delighted when he saw that the University of West of England had decorated these tables in Tesco's colours.
We're all friends together.
Just mention that in passing. The most serious point is, I think this business of cash flow must be absolutely crucial. And I was very reassured to hear that from the private sector. I mean, the public sector recognised about 2.5-3 years ago that there must be at some stage even worse troubles about cash flow and fair payment down the chain. I mean, certainly when I was a client, I used to reckon that about 90% of disputes in the country were actually to do with payment, either the speed of payment or the quantity. And if we could, the government could somehow, for its procurement, do something about that, so we should. So what we did as Treasury, we got out a thing called the Fair Payment Charter, which is now being launched. And I hope at least some people here have heard about it, because it is now required for all, I see several nods, which I don't think it's nods of falling asleep, I think it's nods of agreement, that actually now it is a requirement for public sector procurement that you should have that the people's setting up the contract and those signing to it should be, and it's in the Olympics, should sign the Fair Payment Charter, which means you pay within 28 days. There should be, unless there's a good reason for not to use a PBA, project bank account, and that involves cascading of payment. So that if I, as a client, pay your company, I don't know, £600,000, that payment is so much for you, so much for the main subcontractors, and that payment through the project bank account goes to the people who should receive it, unless you have a good reason for stopping some of it, because the work hasn't been up to standard, in which case you can stop it. But there's a presumption that otherwise, A, the subbies know what I've paid you for their work, which hasn't always been the case, but it's important. And secondly, that it goes to them automatically unless there's a reason for not doing so. And that should speed up. We reckon that it would save 3% of contract value for clients, public sector clients, if there was agreement to that form of payment. So in other words, we would be, although we were paying quicker, right, there was a 3% because of all the messing around and re-invoicing and disputes and legal costs and so on. There was, on average, across the public sector, and I think it's an important statistic, 3%, doesn't sound much, but it's 3% of that year was £62 billion in the public sector. So it's a lot of taxpayers' money. And so that's what we've gone for. So there should be project bank accounts. And if you're going for government work, you should make sure that the Fair Payment Charter is there in place. And ideally, unless there's a reason for not, if there's projects over £5 million, there should be a project bank account.